Because he couldn't bear the scorching heat of 39 degrees Celsius every day, this black man decisively took off his shoes, ignoring the obstruction of the white people, and leaped from the deck into the turbulent sea waves. He openly violated the regulations of the United States Navy. Enraging his superior instantly, orders were given to his subordinates to capture him back onto the ship, but the splashing water demonstrated the black man's remarkable strength. Despite the efforts of the white elites, they failed to catch up with him. In the end, they could only watch ashamed and helpless as the black man's figure gradually disappeared into the distance. He was the first to reach the floating cruise ship, a sense of invisible pride overflowing, but he was ultimately confined to the punishment cage. Simply because in the racially discriminatory United States Navy, the lowly black man was not allowed to share the azure sea with the noble white man. Black men could only go swimming on Tuesdays. However, the rebellious Carl dared to break this rule to prove he was no less than white sailors. Though born into an inland farming family, he had loved playing in the water since childhood. Doorbell. He ran amidst the sea shaded by lush greenery. His father, aspiring for his son to achieve greatness, didn't want him to follow in his footsteps, a lifetime of farming for a living. Thus, he decided that in Carl's achieve year, he would enlist him into the United States Navy to change his fate. Before departing, Carl told his father that he would return during holidays to help harvest wheat. However, his father firmly instructed him. The father told Carl not to return to the impoverished village beneath their feet, and to never give up no matter how difficult or trying it may be. Damn it! After holding back the surging tears, his father reluctantly parted with the family's prized possession, the only invaluable radio at home, and gave it to his son. On its side was engraved an old saying. Carl, puzzled, full of hope, officially embarked on the unknown journey. After 3 days and 3 nights of travel, he finally arrived at the barracks. But here, blacks were devoid of any dignity. They were either kitchen helpers, or officers' lackeys, or they had to pack their bags and leave. Carl could only silently endure and choose the former. However, the cruelest part was that while he was already tormented by the scorching heat and sweating profusely, he could only watch his white people frolic in the sea. With a sense of injustice, he decided to challenge authority. Although he was lightning fast and fiercely slapped every white face, he ended up in solitary confinement. Fortunately, the discerning captain recognized his exceptional talent and courage, and promoted him to second-class seaman in the fireman team. Filled with pride, he wrote to his father with this good news, but his jubilation was interrupted by the sudden violent rocking of the warship. He hurriedly ran to the deck, only to find that a helicopter carrying supplies had crashed into the sea. The billowing smoke seemed to cover the entire ocean. However, under the captain's calm command, a fully armed diver slowly rose with the elevator platform. He bravely rescued the pilot. From then on, a seed of dreams, like clouds on the horizon, took root and sprouted in Carl's heart. But before it could blossom, news arrived of the first officer sinking into the deep sea, forcing the captain to send another diver to salvage. At this moment, the long-neglected cable suddenly stopped swinging, and the diver fell heavily into the sea, sending up 1,000 waves. You see, the status of a diver on a warship is crucial. The newly promoted petty officer who had just completed the diving task ignored the superior's orders, and without time to put on his diving suit, jumped directly into the sea for rescue. Although he successfully rescued the fallen diver, the diver suffered severe lung injuries on both sides, rendering him unable to dive again in his prime. He had no choice but to vent his accumulated frustration by smashing pots and pans, but he was punished with 3.5 months of hard labor, and the position of chief petty officer was ruthlessly stripped from him. Like a heartache for the people in the naval school, for the young instructor, the people present sighed endlessly. All the resentment was hidden in the hurried footsteps of departure. Carl was not scared off by all this. He requested the captain to recommend him to the diving school for further study, with the aim of becoming a chief petty officer in the future. The captain was stunned by his mysterious self-confidence, and stated that the diving school did not accept blacks. But Carl firmly stated that he wanted to give it a try. In that moment, the gazes of the two intertwined for a long time. Finally, the captain was moved by the starry sky in his eyes, and decided to help him write a recommendation letter to the school. And Carl followed suit and wrote hundreds of application letters. As time passed by, the scent of years grew stronger. 2 years later, he finally arrived at the diving school he had longed for day and night. With his long-cherished dream, he finally welcomed a glimmer of hope. He hurriedly went to the guard post to report. After a phone call exchange, Shimade, now demoted to an instructor, drove to meet him. Carl thought he was there to welcome him to the school, but the instructor didn't care much about this nameless recruit and wanted to dismiss him with a few words. But Carl wouldn't let his efforts go to waste. Begging repeatedly, Carl was met with nothing but exhaust fumes. Later, from the break of dawn to the colorful dusk, until the sunset was within reach, every passerby was observed, and the chirping birds were endless. The rising smoke from chimneys became his pupils, and only at dusk did the instructor return in style. He, as always, tried to persuade Carl to leave. Sir, I am a Navy man. His determination was unwavering. The instructor was finally moved, and Carl finally stepped into the dream school he had longed for. But what awaited him was spit, callously sprayed by white men, a provocation, and discrimination. Unable to endure, Carl prepared to teach him a lesson with his fists, but was drawn to the commander who was observing everything from the lookout tower. Forced into a first encounter, he saluted in respect. Upon arriving at the dormitory, the jovial atmosphere that was there before suddenly turned silent. The instructor, as usual, wanted to hold a welcoming ceremony for him, but the inherent pride of the white man made them unwilling to share a room with Carl. After one person left, others also left the dormitory one after another. In the end, only Arnold, who was ostracized for stuttering, stayed. Together, the two who shared the same fate decided to walk side by side, believing that rewards would come eventually, and suffering would eventually end. While Carl was digesting the bitterness of his journey and his dreams, the instructor, under the pretext of urgent training, splashed him with a basin of cold water, followed by the baptism of a high-pressure water gun. Before he could catch his breath, the instructor pressed his head into a water barrel, calling it a breath-holding training, but it was in fact an attempt to make him give up and leave the school. However, before his departure, his father's earnest entrustment and dreams aspirations destined that Carl could not return empty-handed. No matter how the instructor tortured him, he refused to yield. The instructor then turned his focus to Snorri, who had helped him during the new student's entrance exam. The instructor used foul language to attack him, then picked up a 60-kilogram golden belt and forcefully smashed it onto his stomach. Finally, he pushed Snorri into the sea, asking him to hold his breath for 7 minutes. This was an impossible task, combined with the icy February seawater. Snorri couldn't endure for 2 minutes before surfacing. The instructor immediately expelled him, facing the future. Perhaps it would be lonely and long, but after the hard work, everything would become clear. Those dreams, whether big or small, wishing not to be abandoned, will surely bloom. Not giving up in the inch-long courtyard will surely yield flowers. In the day-by-day, bit-by-bit perseverance, it gradually becomes attainable. Persisting in unwavering efforts, Carl's practical combat capability soared. The instructor couldn't find any faults, but he had only attended elementary school, scoring a negligible 30 points in academics. He would be expelled if he failed again. With the kind persuasion of his teacher, Al took advantage of the weekend to navigate through the bustling city streets and arrived at the vast library to catch up on his studies. But the sight of the stunningly beautiful girl opened his otherwise calm heart. It is said, I had no intention to startle the beauty, but she entered my heart unexpectedly. He placed the flowers on the clean and tidy table, like the sunset sinking into the orange sea. The girl was completely captivated by the sincere love. The two only talked about ink fragrance, not joy or sorrow. The police delivered books without quarreling over time. With the girl's day and night help, Carl's academic performance finally passed. As a result, he obtained the qualification for diving practice. It was an underwater welding task. The two team members had not been underwater for long when the boat suddenly slid down. The sea breeze caused one person's oxygen tube to be firmly sucked, unable to return to the surface. If they couldn't evacuate in time, there would be a risk to life. The two team members were in a panic, not knowing what to do. At a critical moment, Carl volunteered to go underwater for rescue, but just as he arrived, the boat slid down another wushimi eaters. The previous team member felt the breath of death, and regardless of the desperate pleas of his teammates behind him, he fled in the face of danger, leaving Carl alone. Risking his life to help his teammate replace the new oxygen tube, he successfully rescued his teammate ashore. Looking at the white deserter, the disappointment in the instructor's words was evident, but when the honorary medal was awarded, it was still given to the deserter. Everyone knew it in their hearts, but they all chose to remain silent, opting for superficial and risky actions, like clouds dispersing in the vast desert. Carl, who had tasted the bitterness and hardship, longed for the harbor of family to dispel the unease in his heart, but he was greeted with shocking news of his father's death, who had succumbed to accumulated illnesses. He used to think death only came with old age. Now he realized it could be random. True farewells are silent, without the waters of Peach Blossom Spring, where the ancient pavilions pass, just on a usual dusk. Some people are forever stuck in yesterday. Various injustices gradually broke down Carlos' psychological defenses. He wanted to numb his heart with strong liquor, but the bartender, seeing he was black, directly said they were out of alcohol. His teammates nearby even sternly told him to leave. The instructor also bluntly stated that saving the teammate didn't entitle him to buddy up with the Supreme Whites. Then he proudly took out his beloved pipe and boasted of his own achievements. Carl firmly stated that he was definitely stronger than him, enraging the instructor instantly. With contempt, the instructor challenged Carl to a breath-holding contest. If Carl lost, he would be expelled immediately. Otherwise, the previously expelled Snowski would be reinstated for training. Amidst the clamor of the crowd, eagerly anticipating the bloody spectacle, the two geared up, and the thrilling show was about to begin. When the water reached their noses, the official countdown for the match began. The crowd cheered on the instructor fervently. At 1 minute and 15 seconds, neither showed any change in expression, exchanging glances to taunt each other. At 2 minutes and 25 seconds, the situation remained close. At 3 minute youths, Carl remained confident, while the instructor's demeanor changed. At 7 youths, the instructor over 40 had lost the strength of a 20-year-old. Though blood was streaming from his nose, he still refused to yield. Seeing him on the brink of suffocation, a teammate hurried forward to open his helmet. Without a doubt, Carl won this challenge. For the moment, he won the cheers of his onlooking teammates with his strength. The instructor kept his word and let Arnaxi successfully return to the team. But no matter how excellent Carl was, he couldn't break the commander's inherent prejudice against black people. He condemned the instructor for losing to a lowly black man and instructed him to find a way to get rid of Carl. He didn't want a black person to graduate from this military academy during his tenure, which would be a lifelong shame. So the instructor stood in the dim and narrow dormitory, waiting for Carl's return in high spirits. Even the bed had been marked with highly insulting words. The instructor sincerely advised Carl not to participate in tomorrow's assessment. You and others go to hell. You're right, boss. You and I have nothing in common. I may be a fool from a remote town, but at least I'm making something of myself. You're still the same hateful little person. Now diving, you're nothing. Just a lost, broken waste. What were you once? The coach's self-esteem was shattered by this. In anger, he smashed the radio his father gave him before leaving. Watching the scattered photos and broken pieces on the ground, the instructor finally regained his composure. He thought this final thought would also be scattered with the fall. Hey, what did he say that made you try so hard? Be the best where you are. The night instructor had lofty ambitions when he was young, pledging to be the best in the world, but he was not beaten down by life. Nor was he riddled with holes by the evil bureaucrats. He didn't want Carl to end up like him, despairing in the darkness in the end. He prayed Carl wouldn't show up the next day. But a bold heart, sniffing roses, Carl wouldn't easily give up. If fate is the worst playwright in the world, he must be the best director. Amidst the astonished gazes of the crowd, Carl walked slowly with determined steps. This graduation assessment wasn't difficult, just assembling the parts correctly underwater. Although there was no time limit, they had to endure the cold. As the instructor gave the order, the divers, equipped and ready, descended into the sea in perfect formation. The assistants on the deck distributed the toolkits one by one. When it was Carl's turn, the commander on the lookout gestured. The instructor slashed open the toolkit with a sharp knife, then threw it into the vast ocean. Tiny parts scattered all over the seabed. When he picked them up, only the light shell of the toolkit remained. An hour and 37 minutes later, the first one was already done. Carl was still searching for the parts in the ocean, racking his brains to find the components. 4 hours later, even the slowest one had come ashore. At this point, he was shivering with cold, unable to speak clearly. And Carl, still at the bottom of the sea, searching for parts as usual, until nightfall. Still no sign of him coming ashore. At this point, the teammates scattered around. Carl's body had reached its limit, but he still refused to give in. The instructor couldn't bear to see him perish, so he requested to have him pulled ashore by phone. But the commander, with a heart of stone, directly refused. He wouldn't allow anyone to challenge his authority, especially not a black man who was as insignificant as grass. The instructor could only state this bloody fact. The officer ordered Carl to give up, but Carl stated that he was a sailor and insisted on completing the mission. I got my name in time. This unyielding determination earned the respect of everyone present. An hour passed. The tormented instructor couldn't bear to see Carl die in vain, ordered his men to pull him ashore. The chief threatened to fire the commanding officer in order to compel them to cease their ongoing rescue efforts. Little did they know, tyranny had long been defeated by resolute hearts. Suddenly, there was movement from the rope tied to the parts nearby. The instructor instructed the soldiers to pull it up. It turned out to be the assembled device. Immediately after, Carl, trembling all over, crawled out of the water. Everyone was so shocked by the scene that they couldn't describe it. During these 9 hours, 28 minutes, and real seconds in the sea, no one knew how he survived, nor did anyone know what was streaming down his aching face. Was it sweat or tears? But these couldn't conceal his unwavering gaze. Carl became the first black graduate of the diving school. He celebrated with his girlfriend at the bar, learning she was 3 months pregnant. Every second of his jubilant dance revealed uncontrollable excitement. Even happier, the broken radio had been repaired, with the letters on the side marked by the instructor as a reminder to never forget one's roots. Yet the instructor was relieved of his command for defying a military order. He resorted to alcohol to numb his heart, and then, at the party, he struck the diplomatic personnel manager. As per the superior's ruling, he was demoted to a junior sergeant. A once glorious military career came to an end, but Carl thrived. Not only did he marry his girlfriend and father a well-behaved son, he also became an official diver in the fleet. On this day, he was ordered by his leader to dive into the seabed to search for a nuclear bomb. Initially, everything was calm. He chatted happily with his leader, but the next moment, a massive submarine sailed into the area without warning. Carl hurriedly tried to evade, but his oxygen hose was caught by the submarine's wing. Talk to me, Carl. Swim, blue diver. After the submarine left, Carl passed out on the seabed. After a while, he finally regained consciousness. The leader instructed him to be helped up. Just a few steps away, he saw the nuclear bomb within arm's reach. This unexpected surprise delighted the leader, and it was enough to promote Carl to chief diving officer. However, life, cursed as it was, allowed no respite. As the nuclear bomb was being salvaged ashore, the long-neglected rope creaked. Sparks flew. Carl broke his leg trying to save his comrade when the parts brought by the broken rope hit him. He successfully rescued his teammates, but at the cost of losing a leg. His wife, the doctor, told him if he recovered well in the future, he could walk with a cane. His cherished dream of diving became an unreachable fantasy. Even before the media and leadership rewarded him, Carl maintained his composure, feigning smiles, every expression hiding joy and sorrow. Sips of wine full of bitterness and sweetness. Perhaps the heavens didn't want this rising star to fall, so they let the instructor, also in a trough, rescue him once more from the depths of despair. Upon learning of Carl's plight, he hastily sent a newspaper featuring the injured pilot, Jess, who soared again. Carl immediately requested prosthetics for Jess. Then, after Sharwan East, he returned to duty through medical evaluation. All the leaders were dumbfounded by this unexpected turn. After discussion, they tentatively agreed to the request for the dream of diving. Ignoring his wife's tearful pleas, Carl resolutely sawed off both his legs. Even though every night, he was drenched in sweat from the pain, he clenched fate's throat rather than bowing to it. Then began a frenzy of training. Endurance after endurance, jumping rope after jumping rope, but the excruciating pain made him fall. He fell. Fuck these prosthetics. Bitch check, cookie. The instructor, as always, stopped his madness at a critical moment, seeking revenge on the turf in the verdant courtyard. The instructor was completely moved by his innocence. From then on, he guided him into devilish training. The training hall echoed with his falls and rises. Under the orange sunset, his unyielding will cast a determined figure on the shaded path. Through dim nights and snow-covered days, as long as the fire in his heart burns, his steps forward won't cease. The day of arrival won't be distant. Under the cleansing of time and the stimulation of training, he and the prosthetic became increasingly harmonious. Even during the 1-meter run, he was 1分钟1.5 seconds faster than the army standard. The evaluation followed. After Carl was dressed neatly, He glanced at the hopeful radio. With the instructor by his side, he strode confidently towards the solemn evaluation meeting. But before he could enter, the instructor was stopped outside. Carl had to fight alone. Faced with probing gazes around him, he nodded slightly in respect. Before the meeting began, Carl saluted the senior officers, but was bluntly questioned by one of them. Almost 40, you have one leg. Can you really keep up with healthy divers half your age? You're almost 40, and you only have one leg. The question is, sir, can they keep up with me? Carl's witty retort diffused the first challenge, but it also shattered the few remnants of the commander's pride. It was utterly destroyed. Under his whispered signal, a soldier wheeled in a set of the latest alloy diving suits. It weighed 7 pounds. Carl had to put it on with his prosthetic and walk short steps unaided in order to return to his diving position. It's something even an able-bodied person couldn't accomplish. The unfairness of it all was somewhat painful to see, but Carl stubbornly decided to accept the challenge. But Carl withstood the challenge with determination. At that moment, the instructor outside once again disobeyed orders. Bursting into the meeting room, he wanted to help Carl put on the diving suit for the last time. When Carl was about to rise with the help of the soldiers, the commander assumed that the new regulations allowed Carl to stand up on his own. Immediately, Carl struggled to rise with great difficulty. Every muscle on his face was trembling, and he was already panting just from standing up. Drenched in sweat, he still took a step forward. His heavy footsteps responded to the call of his determination, and the sound of his diving shoes hitting the floor echoed the heaviness of Carl's steps. By the 6th step, his prosthetic began to creak. By the 8th step, the prosthetic had visibly bent and broken. Carl endured excruciating pain as the broken pieces lodged into his flesh. Everyone involuntarily gasped in shock, and the commander prepared to declare the assessment a failure. Aaron, you will disregard this as my detail. God damn it, Cookie. Under the encouragement of the instructor, Carl endured the pain of the prosthetic piercing into his flesh and completed the remaining 6 steps. In the end, Carl's steel-like determination conquered everyone present. A nameless emotion surged in like a tide, bringing tears with it. His superior, who had made things difficult for him in every way, had to relent. Carl was restored to his former position. 2 years later, Carl was promoted to Chief Navy Diver, turning his seemingly unreachable dream into reality. After serving 9 years at the naval base, he retired. This is a true inspirational story, from humble beginnings in poverty as a child, to discrimination as an adult, bosses making things difficult and a stroke of misfortune, to finally being physically disabled but mentally strong. All of this couldn't have happened without his quiet and reserved father and his dream assistant. Actually, dreams are like flowers that bloom in the scorching sun, more fragrant than any fine wine. The process of realization is bound to be filled with thorns, storms, but we must have the determination to overcome obstacles. We must know that the world may scar us, but wings will sprout from the wounds. We must know that the suffering we endure today will be repaid in the future. The darkness we experience today will create brilliance in the future. The dire straits we find ourselves in today will surely become a smooth road tomorrow. So when faced with adversity, we must hold on to the belief that the broken Lulan will eventually be restored. With the tenacity to hold on to the King Mountain without relenting, we will surely welcome the endless scenery of another bright future amidst the hidden beauty of nature.